Welcome back to Nate Life Reclamation podcast. And we are here getting ready for Reclamation coming up on January 17th at the Heidi Center in 2026. You can grab your tickets. It's meant for everyone, chiropractors, other practitioners, teams, and the lay public, which means anyone listening to this podcast, it is meant for you. And the reason we really wanted to host it is because many times we will travel quite a ways to go hear amazing speakers like the person I'm going to be interviewing with Dr. Amanda here in a second. And we'll travel and we'll come back and we'll share it with, those that we get a chance to share it with, but we don't always get to share everything. And so getting to be together in space and bringing some of our favorite speakers in is going to be quite the treat. So tonight, we're doing a three-way podcast. We're going to have Dr. Amanda back on, who was just on a few sessions ago, and we are interviewing Dr. Amy Spoelstra, who hails from Idaho. And did you grow up in Michigan?
I did. I grew up in
Okay.
Michigan.
Okay, right on. Well, and we were, maybe pre-recording this and realized I hadn't hit record, so we're getting our little bit of a round two here. So Dr. Amy, will you tell us a little bit about yourself? And then I'm going to let Dr. Amanda jump in and pose some questions for you. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So, yep, I'm Dr. Amy Spoelstra. I live in North Idaho, the Pacific Northwest, and I am a mom of two kids. And I have been practicing for about 18 years. And I'll say my specialty, but my like real life work and my like heart in this work is working with kids and adults, but mostly kids, because we can change the trajectory of an entire life and family if we work with these kids. And kids specifically with behavioral learning, socialization challenges. And I have a real integrative approach in the way we do that, coming from influences in neurooptometry, neuroeducation, nutrition, and the foundation being a clearly communicating, uninterfered with nervous system, and chiropractic being the tool that we use to assess that and address that. And so we learn to lead. We're all about leading with the brain to make the case for what we do as chiropractors and be able to then know how to bridge in the right approaches and the right clinical tools and right now strategies for families, with a nervous system being at the foundation of that. But we have to kind of be able to bring all those things together, with our clinical mind and with our hearts about working with families right now too, because it's not enough to say like, here's all the things that we need to do clinically, and we're going to apply these tools, and we're going to do these re-exams, and we're going to see this change. But you know what? Your kid's refusing to go to school or refusing to put clothes on because of their sensory challenges, or refusing to eat. Don't worry about that. We've got this longer term plan, and we'll get to that. We have to be able to understand the why behind those behaviors, and we have to be able to give some right now strategies for families. And we also have to be able to do that simultaneously as using our clinical tools. And that's really, really important. And usually it's you get one side or the other, but not both. And we really need to be able to do both.
right. So the
Yeah.
short term and the long term
Yeah.
picture. What's the
Yep.
what's the game plan?
Yep. And it starts with understanding the reason for the challenges and knowing how to look at a specific behavior learning or socialization challenge that a child is having. And yes, understand that inefficiencies or communication issues or adaptability issues within the nervous system may be at the foundation, but we also have to be able to take a bit further and say, and what is that or has that been doing to the trajectory of the developing brain? And when we can do that, we can get a lot clearer understanding of why we're seeing the specific behaviors we're seeing,
Mm,
what changes to expect, so that we can know, is this a expected stop along the way and not just, oh, it's a, maybe something new coming up that we don't need to address or whatever. We need to know more about the developing brain, and then we can support parents and work with, in a co-care relationship with other providers, which is sometimes necessary for these kids.
hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Amy, how do you communicate this? Because obviously you could get lost in there's so many things happening, or like you had mentioned before, like there's a primitive reflex here, there's eyes here, like things taking in all this information. Like, how do
Yep.
you not overwhelm the parents? How do you meet them where they're at? And then how do you know what steps to take first?
Yep. Well, it always starts with really going, like, if somebody says to me, oh my gosh, I heard you work with so many kids. I just had somebody today. I was referred to you because I heard that you've worked with my friend's kid who has these emotional outbursts, and it's becoming so big and so problematic that it's impacting our whole family. Like we can't leave the house,
Mhm.
right? Can you help me too? Because you helped them. I heard that you help with this emotional outburst thing. I always start with, I call it the triangle of simplicity. If you've taken any of the Focus Academy stuff, as Dr. Amanda has, we always just start with what we know. We first start with, listen, and this is what I would say to that parent and did. I don't know your child, right? But I do know we've helped and worked with a lot of children that are expressing symptoms like what you're telling me your child is. So I don't know exactly yet, but here's what I do know. And that's important right there, what we just did, because, you know, we don't want to just be like, everything's a nail and I'm a hammer, right? We know everybody's better with an unsubluxated system, spine, and nervous system, of course. But we still have to very simply, and ourselves as clinical detectives, say, but where do I start? What do I do? How do I make the case for myself? That's our job as providers. We first have to make the case for ourselves, right? Clinically. We don't just want to say like we've got it all, we've got the answer to everything, and we don't have to do an exam and look for this. No, we can do better. So we start with let's just, Mom, here's what I don't know, but I also want you to know I've worked with lots of kids that have improved under what we do and seen results that are, exhibiting those symptoms. But here is what I do know. What I do know is that the brain is not fully developed at birth. We know that the brain has to move through a trajectory of development, like it has to grow and blossom, like from a seed, like a flower goes from a seed to a blossoming flower. And that seed, we know, water, sunlight, oxygen, all these things are important to that seed and impact that input to that seed impacts the way the seed moves into that blossoming flower. We know that, right? So we've connected those dots for the parent to understand that concept. And we say the brain's much like that. We start with not a fully developed brain like a seed, and all these different inputs,
Mhm.
inside the body, outside the body, all of these different things impact the way the brain moves through development and blossoms. Here's the deal. At different stages of that blossoming or that developmental process, by the way, the brain goes bottom up, back to front, inside out, right to left. That's kind of how it blossoms. At different stages of that development, we gain different tools to process our world. Some of those tools early on are called primitive reflexes. Then we have like movement tools. That's why we care if your kid's learning to crawl, if they walk, when that happens, how they do it. It's a window into the brain. That behavior of movement, we're observing it, and it's a window into the brain, a window into where we are in that developmental trajectory and how we're moving through it. Then, different stages, we start to have communication development, eye movement development, cognition, and learning. All of these things are windows into where we are in that blossoming process. But, Mom, here's the other thing. We know that it's very common for kids who struggle with emotional outbursts, for example, struggle to maintain their own regulation in their body, to have different gaps in that trajectory. Meaning there's different things that are happening during those stages of that blossoming that may be leading to them not having the most efficient tools at different stages. Therefore, they do not engage and connect and learn the same way or as efficiently as someone who's not having those challenges. So we know brain has to move through development. Different stages of development, different tools. We use those tools to engage, connect, and learn in our body and outside of our body. Here's the other thing we know. We know that stressors have been very well documented, physical, chemical, emotional stressors, tons of research that tells us that that can impact the way that brain moves through development. The other thing we know is that leaves clues inside the brain and the body. What we do on our exam are we look for those clues. We also look at where we are in that developmental process and what tools we have or ones that might not be there yet. And then we come up with a clinical plan to use our clinical tools to address both of those things if we find them. Stress response inside the brain and the body, and the impact and the tools that we're using or not using yet in that developmental trajectory. When we address those things, we see better internal and external regulation, connection, learning, and control. This is what we do for kids. That's also what we do for doctors. We connect those dots for the doctors. right? We connect those dots and then we start finding, so that's like the simplest start. And that can be a much even shorter and simpler conversation for parents, but we want to kind of expand it a little bit here. And then, as Dr. Amanda knows, then we start to find depth. I think of it like a coat rack. Okay, we just made a coat rack with three sides to it, the triangle of simplicity. Now we start to find depth in like, all right, let's zoom into brain development. Let's talk about that more. How do we assess each of those stages? What does that look like? What if it's a typical exam? How about an atypical exam? What does that look like in the classroom? How about at home? How would we educate this person? How would we not? And so we can find depth, but we always have to just start with the simplicity. And we just start with going, what do we know? What do we see happening in this child? What are the clinical clues? What do I need to look for? And then we can put together a great plan. And then we can know if it's working because we can go back to that.
Yeah. And just to clarify for other people too, is I mean, the root of what you're doing is chiropractic, and
Yes.
then you add in extra tools, right?
Yes, absolutely. Because
Yeah.
we are saying, hey, stressors have been shown to impact this trajectory.
Hmm.
And so if we know that the stressors, the foundation is impacting, changes, creating changes inside the brain and the body and the communication and the nervous system, we have to, what I call till the soil first. And that's why chiropractic is the foundation there. We have to till the soil first, and then we have to monitor the changes in brain development. We actually
Hmm.
don't want to add those other things in first because we could be creating more stress and things that we don't need to be adding in when we can see that regulation happening when we're working on the nervous system first. But sometimes, especially in school age children, we actually do need to add in some of these other things in addition to and on top of nervous system regulation and chiropractic being the primary tool there.
Hmm. Would you find that probably if we were adding it in without chiropractic, like we would just further stress their system? Because like there's a reason this is showing up. It's not just
Yeah.
showing up in their body because it's wrong. Like their
Right.
body's protecting itself.
Yeah, very, very commonly. I would say,
Hmm.
is it always going to be the case? No, sometimes I've found, interestingly, you can have a subluxation, structural shift of the spine impacting the nervous system be secondary to an altered eye movement pattern that's embedded, right? And so you still need both, but it
Hmm.
could be at third grade, we started to have we had some eye movement challenges and the demand of reading was increased at that age. And now we started to develop a postural a chronic head turn because we weren't converging at the eyes efficiently. And so now we have this chronically stuck subluxation pattern, structural shift here, embedding stress in the nervous system. So that's why we have to know what to look for, but then want to use them both.
Hmm.
Both. Most of the time, especially when we're talking, younger kids like third, fourth grade and younger, the primary thing that we find is we want to do nervous system first. We do not, even if we see reflexes that are not retained, eye movements that are inaccurate, we do not want to start there. We want to start with correcting subluxation and the nervous system support and then watch and wonder and see the change happen because we don't want to create more stress when it's not necessary.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Amy, I got a question. So you had said before when we were recording before this about that your brother was part of the catalyst for your dad, who was an optometrist that ended up becoming a neuro eye doctor.
Mhm.
And that set the foundation for you to like have this interest in the brain and the eyes, and then came into chiropractic school and you were like, oh, these two things need to be speaking each other's language, essentially. Did you right away go into practice with that lens right from the get-go and start working with kids like your brother? Or how did that progression transmit into now I'm teaching other practitioners how to use the knowledge that I've learned?
Yeah, good question. I knew that I was meant to put these pieces together. However, I did not know how to do it. I was like, I know that I know we'll get better results if we can merge these. But one of the struggles I had was how do I merge these but keep chiropractic at the foundation? Because I felt very strongly that we need to remove subluxation first and address the nervous system first and not jump right into eye movements or visual cognitive retraining, etc. And so and then I was like, and how do I do that clinically and have the systems for that? But then also, how do I do that and educate the parents about what I'm doing, and how do I have proper systems to make sure that I'm doing both and that I'm doing the right thing at the right time. And
Mhm.
so I didn't know, and I fumbled around a bit in practice. I knew when I started my practice, I wanted to be mostly pediatric, so I did that, and I had this in the back of my head, like, so I'd start to see these kids coming in with like, ADHD and learning challenges, and I'd go, I know that I need to bring some of these other tools in, but I don't know how or
Mhm.
when. And so I myself struggled and fumbled around with that, and then started to develop systems and communication strategies. And so everything I teach is like, because I've done it and do it.
Mhm.
And it's finding the simplicity and the system on the far side of complexity. And it's been tested and is continuing to be tested. And so that was kind of a big piece of my journey, is going, I'm seeing that a lot of people are doing different parts of this,
Mhm.
but what they're doing is they're doing it in a very mechanistic way. Like, oh, I have a child with a reading challenge, they're having tracking challenges with their eyes, so let's drill the eyes. But that's very mechanistic. That's not really answering why
Why
are they having
they're in the first
challenges.
place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Yep.
And in our world, because we work with a lot of kids in the school system where we don't have a lot of insight into the home life and the parents, and so we're bringing chiropractic to them, but many of the other things don't necessarily come online. How much is it teaching the parent how to do the things versus you doing them with them in the office, or like, once they have the adjustments and the subluxation patterns are changing, like how soon do you add in some of these other things to help
Um,
their change?
so the first part of that is, I always say, the more we can get mom and dad to know and understand, like, the faster we're going to get there, right? Because that, there's just so much to that. And this also the same thing with schools, which is why I love what you guys are doing, working with the schools and teachers, because appropriate, connection and educational demand is an important part of this process as well, and stress response and all of that. But nonetheless, in the perfect world, we're working with the whole family unit, we're working with all the support people that are in there, and we're going to get there faster. But as you guys have experienced, you're still going to make massive change with the individual and the people, the child and their family unit, by just helping them have a more adaptable nervous system and supporting their developmental trajectory by working with correcting subluxations of the nervous system. So, you know, it's like there's the perfect world, and then there's like what
Yeah.
normally happens. So,
Mhm.
that's the first part of that. I'm trying to remember what your second question was on
Well,
that.
I guess part of it was just like, when do the parents come online to do it, or how do we
Yeah.
do that? But also,
Yep.
I'm wondering, maybe you have some of that where it's like virtual training for the parent.
Yeah.
Is there?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Yep. We do a lot of support in a lot of different ways. This is what we call our right now. We have our clinical tools. I say we have to fill two buckets: clinical tools and right now strategies. And the right now strategies are really for the parents and helping them understand, okay, well, that behavior was a window into the system, and here's what we're doing about that as far as nervous system and the tools that a child has. So we can help them understand the why behind the behavior, and then what we're doing to address that, more, we'll say longer term, like changing the trajectory of that child's development.
Sure.
But there's also okay, so what do you need to do right now? Well, first is helping the parent understand the why behind the behavior. And that's where we have 8 hierarchies of brain development, and teaching them a bit that in little pieces, and then giving them some strategies on, okay, when you see that scenario, try this.
Mhm.
And we can do that because we're informed about what's the why, right?
Yeah.
One thing that we hear parents say all the time is, no one's ever explained to me why my child is doing this. And that's huge, because that helps shift them from the bad kid to reason for behavior expression of
Yep.
life model, which is really important, because then that changes the way that they can connect with their kid, the way they can advocate for their
Mhm.
child. And
Right.
that's really important.
Totally. Yeah, that's huge. Hey,
Yeah, I remember, like, as an example for this, like one of the things that I remember stood out so much was like, as a kid is moving up this hierarchy, like they might have emotional outbursts more, like, or they might be sad or depressed because their friends, like they don't have friends.
Yep.
And you have to be able to explain to the parent, like, well, actually, this is a good thing because now they can recognize themselves from others and recognize like they are moving up in the trajectory, and just
Yes.
spinning it so that parents can understand
Yep.
what they're seeing in their kids and not see it as wrong or bad. Mm-hmm.
Yep. That's such a good example. I love that one. That's an example of the self-awareness hierarchy, one of the hierarchies of development. And it's like the first thing we know in our universe is self, right? And if we have distorted processing within ourself, which can happen from altered proprioception and mechanoreception from subluxation, we don't have a good awareness of our own body and then how our body moves through space. And so we may see altered movement patterns, which can lead to postural distortion and tonal challenges and things like that, but also just a lack of awareness of my own body and space. Then it's okay, what about my body outside of my body? And then it goes to others, right? And then facial expressions and then emotions. This is a hierarchy of development. Well, when we have a child who's not there yet on this hierarchy and they're unaware of, the social dynamic outside of themselves, they may present like the kid who stands too close and hugs too hard, but isn't really aware of it. And parents might say things like, well, yeah, they don't really have a lot of friends, but they think they do. And they kind of are in the social dynamic, but it doesn't really bother them. But it's important that we, like you're saying there, like help the parents understand that as they start to have more awareness of self and outside of self, as they move up that hierarchy, they're probably going to start to realize that they're not really connecting socially. And that will be sad and hard. And we may see different types of behaviors or avoidance or things that happen that if we don't understand why we're seeing that behavior, it will seem like, oh no, my kid's moving better, but now they won't leave their room and they don't want to go to school. What'd you do to my kid?
Mhm.
And it's important that we know that's a predictable stop along the way. And let's give you some right now strategies to support you in that while we're moving towards efficiency.
Well, that's super interesting. That would be, I don't know what you'll be sharing with our public session, but even like those strategies around identifying these, did you say 7 layers of the hierarchy of development? Like that could be great. I'm also kind of geeking out because I know Katina usually shares a lot about brain as it relates to like the movement patterns in adults. And so I'm imagining there'll be some cool connections there between how she kind of interprets and walks through what she's seeing in people's patterning, and what that tells us about their brain, and then what you're going to be sharing with us. So that will be awesome. I guess with that said, because I don't want us to go too much over, so especially since this is round two of us recording here. Amy, is there anything else you want to share with us before we see you in January?
No, I'm just really excited. I'm excited for your event. I'm excited for everything you all are doing. I think it's pretty incredible what you're doing in the schools there, and I think it's incredible that you are just educating so many people on this work and on chiropractic, and that you're able to be helping these kids have a better expression of life, whether their whole family dynamic and unit and support know what's happening or not. You're doing that, and I'm so excited about that, and I'm happy to be supportive in any way to you guys, and one being through this event.
Yeah, well, we'll be excited to have you here. This will be great. And there'll be a lot of local chiropractors hopefully at the event too that will definitely be interested in focus. So thank you so much. And we will have many, many different opportunities, I think, for you to connect into whether you're listening to her in the morning or doing some CE with Dr. Amy in the afternoon, or it'll be an all-day event. So public and professionally, she'll be around and can connect in and probably ask some questions too. So that'll be great. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Amy. And I'll catch you on the
Yes.
side.